Hi everyone. So today we're going to talk about color grading. Now, color grading is going to be different than color correcting. Color grading is more about using color to communicate through whether it be an image, video, even animation uses color grading all of the time. All right, so like I said, this is different from color correction. Now, we talked about white balance before, and that's used to color correct to achieve that balanced look of about 5000 K. But color grading is more about changing the mood or the communication of the photo. Now you can use white balance to do that. So classic example is usually if something has a little bit more yellow to it, it feels more sunnier. Makes sense, right? But if you have something that has a little bit more blue to it, it usually feels maybe a little bit more gloomy, especially if you darken the image down a little bit. So why is color grading important? As creatives, color theory is applied to pretty much everything we do. You're going to hear about color theory and psychology for a very long time through your whole career. And color grading can really be great for communicating things like mood, character, time, and location. Now you're probably wondering what the heck I mean by this. I'm going to show you some examples. But before we get to that, let's look at this quick quote. Considering a color look for a creative project before production is an essential part of any process. And this is coming from Mike Griggs of creativeblock.com. I put the link if you want to read over his post on this, but he works in the industry, and this is something that is always, part of the planning process. Mood boards are all about color, whether you're an animator or an interior designer. Those things matter. So let me show you some quick examples of how color grading can be used in these different ways. So this first example is about mood. So I took this photo in Yosemite, and I think she was just like maybe looking down at some critters scampering around. But how she looks against, the mountains over here is very thoughtful and very contemplative, right? But if I add blue and darken the whole thing down a bit, it gives this feeling of gloominess or sadness, or a dark time in their life. So very quickly and easily, I could take this kind of contemplative mood and turn it into more of a serious, sad type of mood. Okay, for character, so I'm going to be, for these next couple examples, I'm actually going to be using some stills and such from movies and shows. Once, after this lecture is done, next time you jump on, whatever streaming you like or whatever, and you start watching a show, pay attention to the color grading because it is used beautifully in so many different productions. All right, so character. So for example, here we have the Joker, and the use of green tinted grays generally has a kind of sick or uneasy feeling. This communicates that there's something just not quite right about this character. And bonus, there's also these pops of red that also communicate danger. So they're using all these different colors to come together and really communicate. Now you might be like, wait, what are you talking about, grays and greens? So when this was originally shot, all of this back here was probably not this really greenish color. This was done afterwards in post-production to help with the communication. And I believe at the bottom of this image, yeah, we actually even have, let me move my little screen here. We have a color palette of the different colors that were used for this. So another thing I've noticed the use of this green tint in, I should say, is if there's scenes where, and not just in this movie, but I've seen it in lots of movies and shows, where they're in a hospital, but there's something weird happening in the hospital. You're supposed to get this eerie sense that something's just not quite right. There will be this greenish tint to the hospital. Most things are white because it's sterile hospital environment, but there'll be a slight green tint to kind of give you that uneasy feeling. All right. Okay, so next let's talk about how color grading can help you communicate changes in time. So these are screenshots from a show, I guess it's kind of old now, called That 70s Show. And what they do is that they use different colors to communicate these different times. And what I noticed is that they only use the black and white when they're using the main actors to show them at a different time. But if they use different actors, so this is supposed to be young Kitty and this is supposed to be young Red, then they go back to color, but they do use really bright or brightened reds, yellows, and blues to kind of give it a more old feeling to it. So, and that kind of, the triadic, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what triadic means, but that triadic color scheme of yellow, red, and blue is often used for slightly older things. For us right now it'd be the 70s. Since this is set in the 70s, the show, it's used to show scenes in the 1940s. So really interesting. Now, like I said before, they'll switch to black and white when they're using these same actors, but they still want to show there was a change of time. So this is supposed to be them as young adults when they first had kids. And yeah, so that's when they switched to black and white. Really interesting how they decided to go with that. All right, and location. Oh, one of my favorite series, Game of Thrones. So, color grading is so awesome for showing different changes in location. In this show in particular, there's so many different locations that they move from, so it becomes really, really important. And not just color grading, by the way. The costume design in this show is just fantastic. If you ever get into that kind of stuff, definitely check it out. But you'll notice that whenever they're in the north, which is supposed to be really cold, then there's a very obvious blue tint to it. And whenever they're in the south, which is supposed to be very warm, there is a warmer tinting going on. So this can really help us when we're following different characters, like, okay, wait, where are they now? You know, trying to keep all these different locations in mind. All right, so let's talk a little bit about color psychology. Now, color psychology is a huge, huge topic. You know, there's whole degrees on color psychology, so we're just going to touch on the basics real quick, but it's really good to keep in mind when you're trying to think of designs, what colors to use in your designs. So, we can use color psychology to better communicate through our designs and images. And note, though, that context is really important as well. Okay, so a big example is red. Red can communicate both love, think of Valentine's Day, and it can communicate anger and danger. And that has a lot to do with early associations with red and blood. If, you know, back in the day with our ancestors, if you saw blood, you were in danger. This was an emergency. This was a big deal. So red was actually one of the first colors to actually get a name because it was so important to our human existence. But yeah, so anyways, tangent. The context is really, really important. And so the reason why I chose this particular little image here is because they do a pretty good job of telling you some of the good things and the bad things of each color. And I'm going to let you go ahead and look at this on your own and really read through it. But yeah, it has some really good stuff in it. Like, for instance, black suggests mystery, evil, and grief, but also simplicity, tradition, and sophistication. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It really depends on the context of how you use it. Yellow is a color of optimism, cheer, and play, and it can promote happiness. But the overuse can irritate the eyes and agitate people. So there's some really good, quick little tips in this too. Make sure you come back to this and read it thoroughly. And hey, even save it. Save it to your phone. Bring it up every once in a while when you're trying to decide what colors to use. All right, so who uses color grading? Everyone. Everyone in the creative field basically uses color and therefore color grading in their work, especially though photography, design, well, photography for design, I should say, videography, animation. So going back to Mike Grigg's blog posts, in there he talks about Pixar, one of the masters of storytelling. They create a range of color scripts before production commences, which indicate the color palette that will be used for each scene. This ensures that the color is helping to tell the story rather than fight against it. So really important, you want to make sure that everything is working together to communicate what you are trying to communicate. All right, so next what I want you to do is, once this video is done, I want you to read this overview of basic color theory in film. Now it's, it's all about film, which is video, but it has some really great information in there, and you're actually going to be using this information for one of your projects this week. So don't skimp out on this. Go, once I'm done talking here, go click on this link, read the article thoroughly, take a couple notes, get some ideas, because you're going to be applying this stuff.